Thanks for joining the networking event, second networking event of the year, 2022. It's good to see you all here, and obviously the topic for today is around employers asking employees for secrecy around their own historic convictions, which is kind of a different subject matter than I suppose people might expect. I think some of the feedback that we've received from the Twitter poll that we ran, which we'll reveal the results of shortly, was people being quite surprised at that even being a thing, because usually it would be people themselves not willing, not wanting to discuss their historic convictions because they don't want to be tarred with a brush or, suffer reputationally or collegially in a new role and stuff. Whereas what we've been exposed to, I think typically HMPPS back in the day when they were employing people with convictions, for example, the general rhetoric was don't talk about it with your colleagues. So me myself, I've worked with various probation hostels and things where, for example, there was a woman who was a manager of one hostel and she had to wait for all of her colleagues to leave the room before she actually, said to me, oh, I've got convictions too. And I was like, oh, right. She said, but I can't tell anybody about it. And the whole messaging around her historic convictions was that she shouldn't speak about it to colleagues because it can unsettle them and stuff. And then more recently, we've had one of our very own exec team, Jerry, who's on the call today, and he's going to share a bit about his experiences on this subject matter. So without further ado, I will share my screen so that you can see the presentation, and we will start the discussion and networking event. So the topic for today is, are employers right or wrong to ask for secrecy around historic convictions? Sorry, let me just start the slideshow properly. Yeah, so are they right or wrong to ask for it? And just to kind of point out that if you are in attendance of the event, we are recording it. We do tend to record all of our networking events for people that aren't able to attend, so they can catch up if they want to. So if you don't want to be recorded, just obviously switch your camera off and just be aware that we are recording the event, and so that we can make it available to others. Okay. Just some Zoom etiquette before we get started is please use the raise hand button. If you don't know how to do that, it's at the top. Where is it? Is it the three buttons? Is it those three buttons? Reactions. How do you actually raise a hand, Dad? Can you see?
Click reactions, and then there's a long thin one above saying raise hand.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so it's the three dots. Click on the three dots and then reactions, and it brings up all different reactions. If you just raise your hand or a thumb, we'll come to you for a discussion point. And then obviously, if you mute your microphone when you're not speaking, that'd be brilliant. And obviously, don't forget to unmute when you are speaking. And please use the chat function if you want to connect with others. Share your email addresses. If you want to, discuss something particularly, just put it in the chat function. That'd be brilliant. So the first thing we're going to start off with is a short poll around the topic question, which is, are employers in your mind right or wrong to ask for secrecy around historic convictions? So vote with your fingers. Adam's going to run the poll, and then we'll see if there's any movement towards the end of the event today. So yeah, are employers right or wrong to ask for secrecy?
Wow, it's a little bit different before.
Is it? Have you got the results?
You have.
Have I?
On a slide.
Oh yeah, I've got the results for the Twitter poll. But are you going to keep those results secret until the end?
It's entirely up to you, because we can compare it all at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Why isn't it letting me?
End the poll.
There we go. Yeah. So so there's the end of the poll. It's actually brought up. Can everybody see the results from the poll that we've just done? Yeah. So everybody thinks it's wrong. Pretty much 78% of the attendees think it's wrong, and 22% are unsure. So I mean, obviously I voted wrong. I'm interested to know about the unsure, actually. Does anybody mind sharing who voted unsure and the reasons why?
Oh, I did. Sorry, I just came in. I'm late joining the meeting, so I wasn't fully clued up. But it was just a quick sort of flash response without giving it too much thought.
Yeah.
I guess really the thoughts behind it would be that depending on the job role, depending on convictions, and that was sort of like where I went as a quick sort of response.
Yeah,
So
no, that's what we wanted. So
the majority would be no, that it is wrong for them to, but maybe on occasion it's, I don't know.
Yeah, have you got any examples of when you think it might be appropriate to? And there's no right or wrong answer. I think we're just fleshing it all out and just exploring the topic.
So, oh God, if it was a bank robbery, and then maybe working with money or something like that.
Yeah,
I know I'm sort of coming from the movies scene a bit here, but I can't. It was just a flash kind of response. I came in late and I just quickly hit the button, so I've not really given it much thought.
Yeah, no, thanks for expanding on it anyway. It was the results in our sort of meeting are, as Adam said, quite different to the Twitter poll that we ran, which had 40 votes when it ended. So, I mean, I have to apologise for the way that I worded the question because it wasn't very clear. I think Adam rightly worded it slightly different in today's poll, so that could have skewed the results maybe. But I missed
that then. So.
Yeah, so we asked the same question, are employers right or wrong to ask people with convictions to keep their offending backgrounds a secret in the workplace? Most people said yes, and I'm assuming that they said yes to it being right, and that no was wrong, but obviously we can't be 100% sure on that, so apologies for the lack of clarity around that. We'll keep an eye on that, but just to expand a little bit more on, I think, what people's thoughts were around that. Some of the context around the responses were, it would be important to understand the reason why, but in general, I believe that request carries some stigma. And then somebody else said it's the employee's story. I would worry if an employer put that sort of restriction on an employee. And then another person who voted unsure said, I think giving an overarching statement as a definitive answer can be troublesome. We are all individuals and matters like this need to be dealt with on an individual case-by-case basis, and hence their unsure response. So Jerry, who is one of our exec members, his response was, he said, when I sat in front of my new employer, I knew I was being judged on my past, even though I left prison 12 years ago. They didn't see Jerry Keogh, dad, business founder, employee. They saw a criminal, ex-offender and an embarrassment. That's quite a strong, sad statement that you made there, Jerry. I mean, do you mind just putting a little bit of meat on the bones and explaining maybe what happened in your situation, just to give a bit of context to people?
Yeah, so is my speaker okay? Because I normally use headphones up, not okay. So yeah, so I kind of applied for a new job. I ran my own business for 3 or 4 years in Glasgow, and I came back to Birmingham. And I applied for a job, and I will give a bit of context, I don't mind. The job was actually working within school, within the careers departments, and I work on a strategical level, supporting schools with their careers, making sure they get pathways. Anyway, so put my application in, done the interview and was successful. And then obviously, because I work in schools, they have to do an enhanced DBS, which is no problem. And it took a little bit longer, obviously, for me to, actually it didn't take a little bit longer, it probably took the same time as everybody else. But obviously when my DBS came back, I knew, and I'd already had the conversation with HR that there would be a sit-down discussion, risk assessment, and I had no problem with that whatsoever, because I understand from a business point of view, safeguarding, understand from a business point of view that they have to tick all boxes to a point. And I think some employers actually potentially just want to sit and understand, potentially what, the thought process was or whatever. I'm quite open-minded that way. I'm very much not a shouty person about banning the box and things like that. I don't mind that. So I was all prepared. It was fine. I'd signed my contract, and then when I went to do my sit-down interview, they had my DBS, obviously with my conviction, and all my convictions were theft. And they went through each, and so there was 12 charges. So they went actually within the one conviction. They went through every charge with me, and then says, actually, do you know what? It's unrelated to the job. So what we're going to do, obviously, is hire you, and we would like you to start obviously today. Blah blah blah. And then the HR person in charge of the company, she actually, so as we're sitting there, she then went, however, we have had a discussion with senior management within the organisation. So it wasn't just like an off-the-cuff comment. Then she said, we would like you not to disclose or talk about your conviction or the fact you're being to prison with any members of staff. And it kind of took me back quite a bit, because I could understand if she says, don't speak to the head teachers, or don't disclose to the school, because it's not relevant, and I would never ever do that anyway. However, when you're talking about, and it was quite adamant, we don't want you to talk about this. However, I did say, I said, well, that's going to be a bit of a difficulty. I said, one, I'll respect what you've asked. And I kind of kicked myself a little bit even on that. However, it was a job and I needed a job. But then I did say, I says, well, my LinkedIn profile, I says, I don't hide the fact that I'm an ex-offender and I've lived experience, and I ran unlock employment on the back of being an ex-offender, lived experience to support ex-offenders to stay out of prison. And then there was a wider story. So they went, okay, we understand that, but we still don't want you to disclose. So anyway, I ended up I finished the meeting. And I had agreed to what they said, because I was kind of caught off guard with it. And I felt, to be honest with you, I felt really embarrassed by it. I think I've had conversations like this before with employers, sit down, risk assessment-esque type, but I've never in my life ever been told, don't tell anybody, especially after they've been through my convictions. And obviously there was, it's not violence. There was no, and I don't even want to say that that's an excuse to say that anyway. Mine was very much a blue-collar crime. And it just got me thinking. It got me thinking, 12 years down the line, I don't care what anybody says. I've ran my own business. It was really successful. We changed lots. We supported 350 people and it worked. Blah blah blah. But then at that point, when I was sitting there, you kind of sit there and go, they felt they were doing me a favour by giving me a job. That's really what I got from that. They felt they were potentially supporting my rehabilitation again, which I felt. And I got that very much from the interview as well, about how, this would be a great step. And I actually had to stop them during that point and says, no, this isn't, I'm involved with like the New Leaf Network. And I actually had to stop talking at that point, because I realised that I was getting angry and I didn't want to be angry. So I did agree. And that's when, I think it was a couple of weeks later when we were talking with Mary Claire and Adam on one of our calls, I kind of brought it up. But there's another flip side to this, which I don't mind discussing, and I kind of spoke to Mary Claire and Adam about it before, was that I'd agreed that we do this as part of our talk today. And then when I saw the slide that went out on LinkedIn, advertising what we were going to talk about, and I don't know, it kind of hit me again on the basis that I've always been the biggest advocacy of supporting guys like myself, women, anybody who walks through the gate, to support them to not ever go back through the gate. And I feel that having this discussion is part of it. But again, I couldn't promote this event. I felt I couldn't promote it across my social media. I did like it, but I normally put a big thing on it and promote it. And I felt embarrassed about it. But then I also felt that it would be detrimental to my work as well, because I'd agreed to something through HR, rightly or wrongly, and potentially you could sack me over it because I'm publicly talking about my conviction. That anybody that knows me or follows me in any social media, I'm not shy about stuff like that. I'm quite open about what I talk about. So I kind of felt it's, you know, there's been a lot of, I hate using words like self-reflection and stuff like that, but I've had to look at myself a little bit and go, you know, how do I deal with this? What do I do? You know, and I suppose I'm maybe at the other end of the scale where I've had this all my life. You know, people judge you all your life. We know that. Anybody that's been inside, we get that. But I did actually think years ago I'd left it behind, but it doesn't. Sometimes it can come up, bite you on the backside like that, which it has done. But the flip side of it, I'm in employment. I've got a really good job, making a difference to lots of people's lives again, which is what I want to do. But you still feel you're indebted to people, which I shouldn't be, and I feel that's wrong. So that's just kind of what I wanted to share with the group today.
Thanks, Jerry. Just a quick question on that. So I was interested that it was a collegial thing that they didn't want you to share with your colleagues, and I just wondered what you felt the reason for that was. What did you kind of read between the lines that meant?
I genuinely think it was embarrassment. I think I don't mean that in a harsh way. I felt they thought it would reflect badly upon them as an organisation. The fact that they'd hired an ex-offender. You got to remember, I'm working within a school-esque business where I'd say about 50% of the employees are ex-head teachers, and then a lot of them are made up then by governors, teachers, and people within that sphere of whatever. I'm a bit left field, but because of all what I've delivered over the last 10 years, I kind of sit well within what I'm doing. So I think they felt it would damage their reputation if people within the company knew that I was hired. That's what I feel.
Do you think there was any? Do you think any of it was born from wanting to protect you as a new colleague?
No, I think I made it very clear that before the interview, how I was actually quite open with who I am and what I did and the time I served. And I kind of used that as kind of to say, look, I'm quite open about everything, so don't worry about it. You can have a frank conversation with me, because I actually felt I flipped it on the other side for myself. I was thinking they were feeling embarrassed about having the conversation with me, and then at the end of the conversation, I kind of realised they were embarrassed, as in for me, they were the ones that were embarrassed, because I have had that quite a bit when I speak to employers. You know, I've been involved in employability for years, and you do get employers that they can't have that difficult conversation they feel with when they're employing somebody, because they're embarrassed by it. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to talk to somebody. They don't know how to breach it. They don't know how to talk about it. So I genuinely thought I was getting into that type of conversation. So I thought I was making it easier for them by saying, listen, it's not a problem. You know, it's not something I've got buried. I actually use it to support other people. And then at the end of it, they're like, we don't want you to do that.
Was there any, did you ask for a reason why, or did they volunteer? There's no reason.
And I think that's where I didn't, and I think that's kind of maybe in all my time of supporting people into employment, I always ask people to not challenge, but to, you know,
ask for feedback.
Yeah, ask for feedback and just doing whatever. You know, there's a little bit within me that feels like I was a wee bit of a coward, or there was a wee bit of I was just protecting myself and I wanted to get a job. Of course, that's what it was. But my whole life, or the whole last 10 years, has all been about, protecting and supporting people that have to move on. So I've kind of had this since then, so I don't know.
Also maybe even being asked to keep it a secret might kind of create that kind of muting effect. Do you know what I mean? In terms of you feel like it's a stigmatized request. So
Yes.
that puts you back in your box a little bit in terms of...
Yeah, it does. But the ironic thing about it was I'd already had the conversation with two of my colleagues.
Right.
Is I'd already been there a week before I had the HR interview. So we were talking about, we're passing about what we're done, and somebody mentioned about this, I see what you do, and it's lived experience. So does that mean? And I went, yeah, that's what it means. Yeah.
How was that news met by your colleagues?
Oh, they were brilliant. They were phenomenal. They went, "Oh, you'll be brilliant at this job because you're going to be dealing with, kids that don't have career pathways, that are getting in straight into criminal justice, that are involved in it. You're exactly what we need." But I didn't think about it like that. But then I was like, yeah, actually, that's a good point. So, yeah, it was just interesting. Listen, I know for a fact that everybody in my work knows, because they've all looked at my LinkedIn, and I know for a fact everybody knows because I've kind of, even today I was at a works conference, and I'm sitting in a hotel where we had a works conference, and everybody's gone, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to do a talk on an event, a networking event that we're doing." And it's like, "Oh, what is it?" I'm like, "Criminal justice that I'm involved with," and you could see a couple of people go, it was like that awkward silence. I'm not going to hide it, but what I won't do is I won't breach that HR rule at the moment, because I've just moved back to Birmingham and I want a job and I need a job.
And there's no judgment from anybody about
yeah, but I definitely it just made me think that even though today, and listen, I know things change and things stay the same, but it is interesting. It is interesting how that conversation took place within my employer at the top level, and it was decided, look, we would rather he didn't discuss it like that. I don't know, maybe were they thinking I was going to walk about with a placard on my back saying I've been to prison?
Just one final question, Jerry, before I go to see if anybody else has had any experiences like this. You've always been a really healthy person, very open, accountable for your your past and the decisions that you made back then, and for me you come across as a really healthy, grounded individual. Does their request affect that at all? Like, do you still feel as healthy and as grounded, or does it feel differently? Does it now that it is a little bit of a secret?
I think I think even today I was sitting with a group of 8 colleagues, and they were all keen, they were all interested to find out, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And I lied to them. I actually lied to them. I couldn't tell them the topic of conversation. I just said it was employability within a criminal justice system, because that's my field. Yeah. And that doesn't make me feel good as a person, but
it is what it is. You've been asked to do something.
Yeah. So it's kind of, and I also feel a bit self-conscious as well, is that I would be the first, if that was someone else telling me, I'd be right on their back about saying, "You can't stand for this, you can't do this, you can't do that." But then I also, so it's kind of, it's like,
it's difficult. It doesn't sit well with you. It
doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well with me. However, I do love the job that I'm doing at the moment. Yeah. I absolutely adore what I'm doing. I think it's, and I know it's something that potentially could be another career for me for the next good while, that I could, and that. But then again, I'm also kind of reevaluating within the short term about, well, what are my career prospects within the work? You know what I mean?
So thanks for sharing that, Jerry. I think it's really helpful to have like a personal story that kind of contextualizes the feelings and what was asked of you and why it was asked of you in that situation. Just interested to see if anybody else, any of the other attendees, has got experiences either of being in a similar situation to Jerry and being asked to keep things a secret, or conversely in the employer's seat where they've maybe had to ask somebody, or yeah, anybody that's got any views on what's been said so far. We've got some chat. Let me just have a look at the chat. Somebody has their mic unmuted and one can hit, yeah, please mute. Thanks, Gerard. If nobody has any experiences that they want to share, I can't see if anybody's got their hands up. Adam, can you?
There's no hands raised at present, no.
Yeah.
Gerard has a raised hand.
Go for it, Gerard.
Hi, it's very interesting listening to Jerry, what he's been talking about there. I actually work as a magistrate, and I have 6 criminal convictions.
Really? I didn't even know you could be a magistrate with convictions.
Oh, well, now you do know. Every day is a school day.
Wow.
So I have, I mean, albeit I would say they are misdemeanor offences, dating from when I was 14 at school. And my last one when I was 29, where I was convicted in 1980, yeah, and that was for abusive behaviour, insult behaviour, etc. I've been done for criminal damage, threatening behaviour, all that kind of stuff. And like Jerry said, when he applied for his job, the same with himself within the magistracy, they actually asked me to go through every offence one by one, which I did. And they did say to me, how would you feel if your colleagues knew about your convictions? And I've been a magistrate for nearly 10 years now. And at the time I thought, well, it doesn't really matter whether they know or not. However, because I've been a magistrate for 10 years, I know that unfortunately I work with a lot of people that I would actually deem to be quite narrow-minded. And there was a thing quite recently, I believe approximately 3 to 4 years ago, the magistracy was stating the fact that they want to employ more people with criminal convictions.
Right.
And I raised this topic with a few magistrates, and their attitude was, we don't want to be working with criminals. And I thought, but you are.
How interesting. But you didn't feel able or want to kind of challenge that by outing yourself, that kind of, which I understand met with that.
No, some colleagues I do. There's about maybe half a dozen colleagues that I've actually shared it with, but the rest, could I really be bothered telling them about it? I don't think so, because of their attitudes. And you know, they're very middle class. You know, a lot of magistrates, you know, when they say they're looking for diversity, it's very white middle class. You know, and the lord of the manor, etc. You know, and the lady of the manor. That's what we have. You know, let's rehabilitate these people. That's what we need to rehabilitate.
Do unto them.
We're never, those I find, and this is just from a personal point of view, I find the hypocrisy within the government and the Rehabilitation Offenders Act 1974. We are never rehabilitated per se, because if we were rehabilitated, we wouldn't have to declare our convictions.
Couldn't agree.
And the fact that, you know, some convictions, well, with mine over 35 years ago, like any profession, nursing, teaching, law, legal, one always has to declare the criminal convictions, no matter what. And I just find that absolutely atrocious. Why should I be reminded of things that I did 35 years ago? I have, within myself, been rehabilitated, but I still have to declare them. I still have to be reminded of that. And I think that's the hypocrisy of the government, stating that we always have to declare our convictions. So,
I agree.
But again, within the criminal justice system, I have respect for them as such, because they allow me to be a magistrate. And because of my experience and being quite streetwise and also a bit of an academic in some ways, and the fact that my attitude is quite different when sentencing the defendants, and the focus on rehabilitation rather than just a punishment.
Do you think that's ever viewed as rather than being insightful and informed, because that's obviously the direction that you're coming from? You've obviously educated yourself, and you've got that lived experience as well as the professional experience. But do you think that's ever viewed by people that may be in the know about your historic, the past, as being biased towards people that are coming through your system?
Biased in what respect?
In terms of bias towards them, maybe that you've got a softer approach because of your lived experience or something like that?
As I say, there's a few magistrates. There's only half a dozen magistrates that know, and again, when we sentence the defendants, I'm more towards rehabilitation rather than just the punishment.
Yeah.
So, and perhaps they know that's where I'm coming from. Yes.
Definitely. Another story. Has anybody else got anything that they wanted to share? Sorry, thanks for that, Gerard. I mean, I love the fact that you're a magistrate and you've got historic convictions. There's quite a few amazing stuff. I've got a governor friend who has a charge sheet as long as your arm from Borstal days, and then there's another lady that I was in prison with who's a primary school teacher. She's not a teaching assistant, she's a bona fide primary school teacher. She was convicted of fraud, credit card fraud, and I thought she'd lied, or I didn't even realise. I just never thought you could be a magistrate, a teacher, a governor with convictions. And it's really comforting to hear, I think, that the glass ceiling has it's been lifted, and there's people like yourself that are kind of leading the way in that, which is just lovely to hear, really lovely to hear, comforting. There was a story that I was told when we started this network, actually, which was over a year ago, almost 2 years now, is it? When we started this network, a lady who 2 years, yeah, a lady who works, she's quite senior in the St Giles management team. St Giles, if for anybody that doesn't know, is it's an organisation that's pretty much led by people with lived experience of the justice system, and they mentor and support and provide information, advice and guidance qualifications in prisons. So she was telling me an example of a colleague that they had who'd had previous convictions and jail time, and she'd progressed and she'd got promoted, and she was a really healthy individual, flourished in that environment, and became really successful. And then she was offered a job, I think, working for probation, so she sidestepped into a probation role where she was met actually with a senior management team that said the same thing to her as Jerry's new boss did, which was basically, don't talk about this, keep it to yourself, keep it a secret. And Maria told me that actually that led to her becoming really unhealthy and feeling like she was living under a black cloud, and that she was tainted in some way. And actually what happened was she ended up, I'm not sure if it was a re-offence or if it was a breach, but something happened, and the lady unfortunately ended up back in prison. And the whole reason for the conversation was that Maria felt there was a real need for a network like ours, where we can talk and be open about our historic convictions in a safe way, and vent when these things come up. Because actually what was happening with her was she was left with all that negativity and that negative feeling around her previous convictions, and it really affected her in quite a profound way and left her feeling unhealthy and unfortunately back in prison. Now, if that's what I'm not saying that you're at risk of that, Jerry, but if that's the way it makes people feel, that it can be like a toxic kind of poisonous feeling inside, I'd argue that that's not the way forward, really. That's not a direction that any of us want to be headed in, especially employers. But thanks, guys. Has anybody got anything else they want to share before we go on to our next poll? No?
I've just got for something for Gerard here. Do you think your lived experience has affected the way when you prescribe a sentence? Like you were saying, you're more for rehabilitation as opposed to punishment. But are you more able to, do you feel you're better at identifying if something's sort of premeditated, or if it was opportunistic, or, like you say, a misdemeanor?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, without a doubt. Yeah, it's, yeah, as I say, it's, I suppose the things with, I heard one of my colleagues say one day, but he's a police officer. Police officers don't lie. And I thought, what? Sorry, could you just repeat that? And he said, police officers don't lie. What do you mean you don't believe the police officer? Now, you know, honestly, I can tell you hand on heart that, you know, the times I was in court, I would say the exaggeration and the barefaced lies that the coppers told during my offences and my trials of things, yes, they do lie, you know, but it's just incredible the fact that this magistrate thought that police officers don't lie. You know, it was just incredulous. And so that part of my experience, realizing, well, actually they do.
Yeah.
They do. And consequently, I do fight for the defendants, you know, and I'm doing it for justice. I've got a passion for justice.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why, and there are some days I do think to myself, thank goodness I was sitting in court today. That could have changed that person's life in an adverse way. So yes, it certainly does change my attitudes, and I do challenge. I really do. But yeah.
Thank God for people like you being in the system, and honestly, gratitude to the system for allowing it, and for finally realising that people, although I know they're selective about the kind of offences that they still let in, for example, in HMPPS's and the government's mind, people with sex offences can never be rehabilitated, people with terrorist offences can never be rehabilitated, and people with hate offences can't be, and also people with murder apparently are untrustworthy for life, despite two of those groups being the least likely to reoffend. There's just a general blanket no on certain offences, which I disagree with, but you know, they are trying, and I think it's nice, it's lovely to hear that they are trying. Thank you, Gemma. Go on.
I was just going to say, I think one of the issues is the fact that, I don't know what it is with society and certain institutions, they seem to think that those with criminal convictions can't go into professions. You know, like as I sort of mentioned before, like the legal, like law, like medical, like teaching. They seem to think that all ex-offenders are a little bit daft. I mean, I studied criminology at Cambridge University just 7 years ago, and there was a chap from Ministry of Justice who came in, and he was really on for the rehabilitation of offenders. I mean, they can get jobs as kitchen porters. I thought, are you serious? They could just get a job as a kitchen porter because they seem to be, that's all they're capable of doing. And they don't seem to realize that there are a lot of intelligence people out there with criminal convictions that can do wonderful jobs and go into professions.
But isn't this symptomatic of that problem, or actually the cause of that problem is that potentially people that are in the more professional roles, like yourself, like Jerry, like my friend who's a governor, like my friend who's the manager of the probation hostel, you know, such good news stories that really epitomise rehabilitation in action. And unfortunately, it's like, oh, don't talk about that. So what's happening there is that society don't get to believe that normal people can, you know, commit crimes in the first place and also come back from that and still be pro-social, positive members of society, probably more so than they were before their experiences. I know I am more pro-social now than I was previously. And I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? It's like the higher up you go. I mean, in my organisation, obviously I'm the CEO, I can talk about it all the time, and I do. But I'm in a lucky, privileged position whereas, you know, other people aren't. They are beholden to HR departments and so on and so forth. So I think that what has to come first is that employers need to be brave, like Timpsons are. You know, Timpsons, yes. Again, it's that lower level role though, isn't it, that we're talking about? It's people that are key cutting. I had a volunteer that I met whilst he was in prison. This guy's CV, he'd worked as the financial director for Steve Jobs and BMW. You know, he was on a salary of £500,000 a year, and he was offered a job at Timpsons, and he was like, you know, no thanks, I'm not really I don't really think that's in my skill set. And he wanted to come and volunteer for me because he actually felt like he could do more good, and he did, bless him. He passed away actually just after getting out of prison. But yeah, it was that kind of dumbing down of offenders that you talk about. It's really distasteful, but I think employers need to, HMPPS for me actually need to lead the way on this, because as soon as the government themselves start being proud of the success stories that are their employees that have been rehabilitated and that are comfortable to talk about it, because that's the key, isn't it? People need to be comfortable to talk about it. They shouldn't be forced to. then it's only then that society are going to realise, actually, God, HMPPS are employing somebody as a governor with convictions, and maybe people are able to be rehabilitated. Maybe we don't need to be ashamed of the fact that we too employ people with historic convictions. So I think there's a bit of responsibility there around HMPPS. We just wanted to do another poll around why we think, what are the reasons why employers might ask for secrecy around convictions. So the choices that we came up with are, you know, obviously reputational damage in terms of business. Would it affect income and revenue? To maintain harmony in the workplace, so, you know, we're not upsetting colleagues and making them scared about leaving their bags in the office, for example. I mean, yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm an ex-prisoner. I always feel guilty. I've never been charged with theft or anything, but I still think that people are going to look at me if something goes wrong in the office. There's this like innate guilt that comes along with having historic convictions, I feel. Is it to protect the person with convictions themselves? Jerry didn't feel that that was the case in his situation, but that could be the case with HMPPS maybe. Or other reasons that we haven't maybe discussed. So please vote why you think the main reason employers ask for secrecy.
We'll let it run for a few more seconds when people are making their mind up.
You can't select more than one, can you? Oh, you can. Is it better to just vote for one, Adam? Will that skew the results?
Not really, because at the end of the day, it makes the results more accurate, but it's not like we're committed to actually provide anybody with our findings. It's for our benefit and the network, and the benefit of also, if people think that it's going to be two things, well, fair enough, you know, because it doesn't just have to be one reason for something. We've had all the questions answered anyway, so it's... Shall we end the poll now?
Yeah, if everybody's voted.
Just about. We'll share results. People
so yeah, evenly split, isn't it, between business reputation, reputational damage and to maintain harmony with colleagues. I think not very many people felt that protecting the person with convictions was the main priority. I'm interested in the others. Can anybody share some light on other reasons that they felt might contribute to that decision? Is anybody able to share why they voted other? Doesn't matter if you don't want to, or just interested to.
Hi.
Hi,
I
Julie?
voted other. Yeah. Can you hear me?
It's a little bit echoey and stuff, but yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so I was a HR manager. Don't scowl.
No,
okay.
no, not at all. Thanks for being brave enough to say that. I really appreciate it.
No, it's okay. We were very pro mental health and convictions where we could be. We were a nursery.
Yeah.
Okay. I've actually moved over to be an IPS employment specialist. So now I help people with drug and alcohol difficulties get back into work. So I'm kind of seeing it all from both sides.
Somebody's the person with the dog in the background, put their mute on. Sorry. Thanks, guys. Sorry, Julie. Can you just repeat what you just said last of all, because the noise took over? Julie?
Julie's on mute again.
The problem is, it was actually my dog.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's completely my fault. Sorry, my husband's away, so I'm actually at home with 3 children.
Oh, bless you.
So I'm actually finding it really interesting. We did hire someone with a conviction, and it was a very minor conviction. I'm not going to lie, we did have quite a big discussion about the whole thing when hiring someone, because it was childcare.
Yeah.
Obviously, you do have, you know, what the parents sort of think and what other colleagues or think, and that sort of thing. But also, one of the main factors that we had to consider was our insurance wouldn't let us hire anyone with a higher up. Sorry, that's really embarrassing. It hasn't brought up the whole time.
Don't worry, honestly, I'm just glad that
anyone with He's gone now, thank you. With a more substantial conviction. Our insurance just wouldn't let us. And we were a little bit worried that if people found out that we've hired someone with a conviction, then other people with convictions would want to come to us for employment, which should be fine. But because we were restricted on what we could and couldn't do as a nursery, we'd then be seen to be prejudiced against certain convictions when actually it was stipulated by the government of what we could and couldn't do.
Right. That's really interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it is. And
it does. It does. So, so did the insurer? So, sorry, just to clarify, then you said about it affecting the insurance. Did the person that you hired, was their offence in the contravention of the insurance requirements, or was it? Was it okay?
We had to speak to the insurer.
Yeah.
And basically, it was theft, and it was several years ago. And they were fine with that. But something like a violent offence, even if it was decades ago, they wouldn't cover us for.
Right. That's so interesting. Yeah. So we hadn't thought of like the insurance implications, and obviously the fact that I suppose you can become a bit of a beacon for employing people with convictions, and that might itself snowball. That was really interesting. Thanks for that, Julie. Really appreciate your perspective on that.
So I'm going to hide now. I feel really bad saying that, but it's just interesting now trying to get people into work, seeing both sides and both sets of barriers.
100%. Yeah, I think it's really important that you contributed to the discussion, to be honest with you, because it may not be the people themselves making those decisions. It could be more bureaucratic reasons, couldn't it? And that's one thing that we haven't really considered. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, thank you for that. It was really interesting. Does anybody else want to say anything around why employers might ask for secrecy?
Okay.
Oh, is that Thomas?
Yeah, Thomas. Yeah. I think it also depends on the country. Okay, because in the US, for example, we know of cases where negligent lawsuits have been brought against employees, especially when people with criminal records were employed and later on went to offend as part of the job. Some employees have been made to shell out millions of dollars, and as a result, yes, they really don't like to employ people with records, really. So besides the secrecy of it all, that is one of the reasons that HR managers in the US in particular keep to their chest.
Thomas, can you just clarify that, sorry, because I missed the reason. So they are, can you just explain again the crux of the matter, why HR departments in the US aren't employing people with convictions? You said about them bringing lawsuits. What was that around?
They want to avoid having negligent hiring lawsuits.
So you mean as part of their due diligence, that's one of the criteria?
Exactly. Okay. Because of the experiences of, there are very, distinct cases in 2011, for instance, in 1998, a case of Foster vs. Loft. And there's a case of someone with, a record who was employed, okay, assaulted a customer in the job. And this was in a bar in New York. And this employer was sued very heavily, and they shelled out a lot of money. And in the state of New York, for instance, yeah, it's one of the places where this is quite high, where the fear of negligent lawsuits is quite high with employees. I just thought I would let you know about that.
No, definitely. Thank you. And that, I suppose, kind of bolsters a little bit of what Julie was saying around that more bureaucratic reasoning and rationale, which is a real thing, unfortunately, isn't it? Interesting. Thank you, guys. Anybody else that wanted to contribute? Okay, brilliant. Thank you. I've definitely found it, I'll be honest with you, I found it more interesting actually having these conversations with, Gerard and Julie and Thomas. I think you've really given us some some food for thought. And obviously, Jerry, thanks for being so open about your own experience. I'm glad that you felt in a safe enough environment and with us to kind of share that. So thank you.
Can I add something, C? Sorry to have interrupted. Right, so just on this whole idea about secrecy and whatnot, I mean, my own experiences have been very different. The two employers that I've worked for since since a criminal conviction have both embraced the fact that of my past, and my first job as a National Career Service Area Manager wasn't necessarily working with ex-offenders. But again, the organisation wanted to make a bit of a song and dance about the fact that they were investing in people with offending histories, and that was absolutely fine. My current job, I'm actually helping support people with offences. So again, there's not an issue there for me. But I think we've got to understand that depending on the nature of the business, the industry within which it sits in, there's always going to be issues around being declaring to the big wide world that they employ people with offenders or not, and as we all know, a lot of it in my mind is down to reputational damage, which then leads on to possible loss of business. And as a business owner, I don't think we could be too critical of organisations like that, because everyone's out to protect their business and look after their own pocket at the end of the day. So I think some employers have more, in my mind, more entitlement to ask for secrecy than others. And I think that's you just got to understand it. But I just want to move this discussion just one bit further and away from employers and how we feel as people with offences. And as years go by and we tend to stop talking about it because it seems to become a little bit less relevant for us, depending on what arena you're having that discussion, what do people think about, the issue about the impact on our families, for example? I don't feel, I mean, both of my children knew I was in prison. It was a bit of an unspoken thing when I was released, because one of them was a bit younger, and we made up some cock and bull story that I was in a military camp. Not that he believed it, because he could bloody read the science, but nevertheless, I think we have to consider the impact on our children and their lives and the impact that it has on that. So I don't know what people think about that, but my son, he's studying law. I used to be a lawyer. I got disbarred as a result of my offences and whatnot. And how's that going to impact my son when he wants to go for a job? Or your dad used to be a crooked brief. That bothers me so much. And I just wanted to hear what people had to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody with
you're in a similar boat to me. How do you feel about you've had your?
Well, I was a school governor at my son's school. So obviously, my day job, I'm out. I'm not proud. Never be proud of my offending history. But no. I'm accountable. I'm open about it, transparent. But then there is certain environments, like around my son and my son's school, where I felt a little bit more protective about that. However, I did learn early on that the mums at the school gate, a friend of mine knew a friend of theirs. They'd had a gossip. They knew that they knew that I was an ex-lap dancer. They knew that I was an ex-prisoner, and they did have a gossip about it at the school gates, as most mums would. I probably would if I wasn't in my situation. If I was more like them. So I didn't kind of get too upset about it. It is what it is. When I became a school governor, I had to disclose. You obviously always have to disclose for things like that, and I never felt judged in that environment. But with my son, I think I think this is where it starts though, because before my prison stay, before I was a prisoner, I think I would have had the same attitude around people that are in prison are bad, they're naughty, that kind of generalizable kind of judgment. And then obviously you go to prison, you understand a little bit more around social justice and inequality and stuff like that. And my rhetoric and the way that I talk to my son about prisoners has changed. And now it's like the people that are in prison have made bad choices and they're being punished for that. And hopefully they'll come out and choose a better way. Do I feel comfortable about this, my son knowing the ins and outs of my offence? No, not at this age. I think it has to be age appropriate. But as he gets older, 100% will be open and honest with him, because it's out there in the public domain. So you know, if I don't, somebody else will. For now, he knows the bare minimum. He does know I've been to prison, and actually he's accepted, he's took that in his stride. And I think it's really important that we do kind of lead with that bravery where possible and where appropriate. And maybe it's like little baby steps. You know, I was thinking when Jerry was talking that he may understandably doesn't feel able to challenge that, and probably shouldn't actually, given the journey that he's had into this job. I think you're right to prioritise your job over everything else. But it may be that further down the line, as you know, it becomes more and more common knowledge maybe between your colleagues, and you know, that maybe it will be a conversation that comes to the forefront, and maybe you will change your employer's mind around that transparency. Who knows? That's up to you to decide. But I think what I'd like to see is, you know, the state being braver around admitting that, you know, they employ people with historic convictions, and that actually, you know, like Timpsons do. You said about reputational damage and the loss of business. Timpsons argue the other side of it. You know, they're quite out and proud about the people that they employ, and they actually make a big deal of it in their tagline that they employ people, that they have the best people, but these people have got histories, if you like. And I think that's celebrated.
Timpsons, full kudos to what they do, MC. It's absolutely fine. But with the greatest of respect to the employees of Timpsons and what they do, it doesn't have much of an impact on people. They just go and get their key cut and off they go. But
yeah, but then I was thinking about that. Ted, in terms of security and people feeling secure. Maybe key cutting is one of, you know, maybe employing people with convictions to do a job like that is quite brave, because you're talking about people's security of their keys, of their cars and their homes. Ultimately, like, you'd think that people would be like, I don't want an ex-prisoner anywhere near my assets. Do you know what I mean? So I did think that, but.
And this is where another. Sorry to have interrupted you again, but just on that point. So, I'm just in the process of acquiring a gardening company, a domestic gardening company, to add to our portfolio of social enterprises at Forward Trust. And our CEO, quite rightfully, and trustees have really raised and kind of got stuck on the whole point of how the customers of that. The customers of that business, essentially mostly higher net worth individuals, like they do quite, you know, posh couple of £1 million houses and all that. How would these people feel with them in their gardens and potential access to their property? And what I tried to do is, before I went to prison, I wouldn't have a gardener who I knew as an ex-offender I wouldn't have anybody near my house who had a conviction. So we have to be careful that we've gone through the system, and we understand people make mistakes and second chances, but some people don't do that. And I was that person 10 years ago. So how, you know, it's a difficult one, MC. It's really difficult, and you get it. I get it. I get the fact that people may not want people with offending histories close to them, that it's close enough to have an impact on their life. Yeah, I get the point about the key cutting, and perhaps there could be a little bit of a dodge there. But at the end of the day, there's no addresses being passed, so that's a bit secure there. But as I said, you know, a cleaner. Would you feel comfortable having a cleaner who's been convicted of offences of theft in your home?
But just to challenge you gently, because this is what this discussion events are all about.
I'm trying to play devil's advocate, by the way, yeah, but just to get that out.
Absolutely. So my governor friend, who's got many convictions, how that came out was we all attended a meeting, it was an education facility at school, actually, a college. And to him and another guy, the other guy was gossiping about me a little bit, and you know, they were like, who's she? And the one guy said, oh, actually she's an ex-prisoner, that kind of chat. And because he'd had that lived experience as an ex-prisoner himself, he kind of felt brave enough then to say, well, actually, mate, so am I, and really put him in his place and shock him, a bit like Gerard did with me tonight. I think, you know, a magistrate kind of stepping forward and saying, I've got historic convictions is amazing and quite mind-blowing in a positive way. And I think it's only when people are supported to feel brave enough to do that really minds get blown, and assumptions about what does somebody look like who's got convictions. Because, yeah, general prison population, there's a lot of addiction, there's a lot of low level offending. There's a lot of a revolving door cycle, but there's also a lot of people in prison who are, like we said earlier, professional, high end, net worth individuals potentially in their former lives, you know, that still need it, that need a second chance. And the more vocal they are about being given that chance, the more it blows people's minds into believing that rehabilitation is possible. And, you know, somebody like Jerry, who's a really lovely, polite, hardworking, articulate individual, you know, eventually being able to say, actually, this is my background, this is where I'm coming from, might just change his colleagues' minds about what is an ex-prisoner, what does it look and feel like. It's not a simple fix, is it? But I definitely feel like it's people stepping forward and saying, like Gerard did, I'm an ex-prisoner, that can change the lay of the land here. You're all amazing, as I feel every time we have these events, and thank you for stretching my own perspectives. We did have another poll, didn't we, Ad? Oh, I don't know if
we've got the I'll have to find it. We've got the final poll here to decide.
A final poll just to see if anybody's changed their minds, haven't we?
Oh no, that's the second final. We'll run that one.
Yeah.
Just being see if anybody's perceptions have changed before we launch the final poll.
So, do we think they're right or wrong to ask for secrecy around convictions?
See if we're going to get 72 and 78 and 22 again. Wow. Not bad.
Don't keep us in suspense.
Oh no, share results now, mate. Just
okay, so a slight shift then.
Yeah, two less votes, but very, very similar, really.
Yeah.
You know, there's nobody said right, so that's a good thing in a way.
I think the only thing that made me hesitate, I still clicked wrong because I think it's a person's story, as somebody said earlier in one of our quotes, but ultimately the bureaucratic thing, I understand that can play a part in it. So yeah, I did kind of feel a little bit more sympathetic to an employer that might have to do it on those grounds, but ultimately I still think it's an unhealthy approach to take. Thanks everybody for participating and doing the polls. We've got one final poll, which is around the next topic choice for our event next month. We have an event on the first Thursday of every month, apart from December and January, which is when we have our conference and awards. But yeah, if you can just vote for which topic or what you'd like to do at the next event, that'd be brilliant. The first question is around, is a gendered approach to people in the criminal justice needed or divisive? What we mean by that is there's a very different approach to females that are in the criminal justice system and men. And obviously a lot of women's charities, for example, really fly the flag for women and sometimes don't include men and vice versa. So it's just to kind of discuss that and unpick that a little bit more, really, whether we think it's a positive thing that women should have a different approach or whether there's more similarities than difference maybe, perhaps, and that it could be a bit divisive at times. And then the other thing that we wanted to suggest is that we have a free-flowing network event where everybody sort of shares what they're doing, any projects that they've got, and that we just generally get to know each other a little bit more for an hour. So yeah, whichever one floats your boat, let your fingers do the talking. Vote now.
We'll give it another minute or so.
Just whilst people are voting there, I hope you don't mind me jumping in again, at risk of making a fool of myself again. I just wanted to thank everybody. So I've come to this to educate myself. I'm quite sort of naive to everything, basically. As an individual, I feel I never judge people. I just sort of see them for what they are in front of me at the time, and I just crack on with that. But in my new role, as an IPS employment specialist, alongside working with Julie, actually, we are being challenged when we are doing employer engagement with quite a lot of stigma. And I'm just really trying to get as much sort of knowledge and help, terminology as well. So the whole sort of, accountable word rather than proud, which you said earlier, sort of noted that down, because I think saying the right thing when I'm speaking to employers will be really helpful. And yeah, I don't know if you would be happy to pass on an email or something, just so that I've got some tools maybe to broaden my knowledge, would be really, really helpful. So anybody that would like to help with that, really.
Yeah. So what are you asking for? Sorry, Vicky. Is it for people to email you, drop you an email with? Go on, you just explain.
So if anybody's just got anything they would like to share with me, some tips to help. So I've got to get employment for some of my clients. One of my clients in particular, he's got extensive criminal history in drugs, and obviously there's sort of quite a lot of the employers that I've been in contact with so far have been very, very negative towards that, and I've been meeting this individual on a weekly basis, and I can see him for who he is, and he's lovely. He's sort of really knowledgeable in his field. I just, and I just think he needs that second chance.
Yeah.
So just anything, any help anybody's got. I don't know if you want me to put my email in the chat.
Yeah, I think that would be
helpful.
handy. Yeah, that would be really handy.
And then
you've definitely got a battle on your hands. It's similar to the work that we do, Vicky, but I think it probably helps the fact that I'm an ex-prisoner, because that straight away, when I drop that, drop that kind of mic on the employer, it's like, would you employ me? Yeah, you probably would. So, I'm vouching for these guys and girls, and we kind of speak their language in terms. I hate using risk language around our clients, because that's all they've ever. Well, that's often a lot of the only language that they've kind of had foisted onto them is around their negative, their deficits and their risk and how they're dangerous, and how to navigate that. Whereas what we try and do is come from a real asset-based approach around what's good about you. Let's focus on that. What skills have we got? What's transferable in terms of your drug dealing history, and what you want to do now. So, but when I'm working with employers, I do tend to still pull that language. That's a bit of a nightmare, Ad. When I'm working with employers, I do tend to use that language because it's language that they want to hear, I feel. So we will use, I will use risk assessment. We've done a risk assessment on this client. Now that risk assessment is just that they've turned up to a course that we've run, and they've turned up on time. They've been polite. They've completed the, it's not a risk assessment. It's just that we got to know them basically. But I'll use that language with the employer because I think it makes them feel a bit more supported and a bit safer. But also I'll give them personal examples. So like Louis came to us, and he had lots of convictions for nicking cars because he's got a real car passion. He thought he wanted to do construction, and then we worked out that actually he just needs to work with cars. So I got him a work placement with a garage that does supercars. They do like Lamborghinis, and you can imagine how nervous this employer was about taking on a kid that's nicked cars for a living for the past few years.
Yeah.
But we vouched for him, and we managed to get him a placement, which was a voluntary placement, and actually Louis proved himself, and he's just signed an employment contract. So sometimes that might be the route to go. I think with your employers, it might be, why don't you try this guy? And maybe it's speaking to the guy first and saying, how about a work experience trial, a placement, to see how you get on. You get in there, you prove yourself to the employer, because actually nobody's going to come and hand you a 25 grand a year job. You've got to prove yourself. It's the same as I did, same as Tev did, same as Adam does, same as everybody does. So maybe it's a case of him kind of putting himself out there on a voluntary capacity, and then hopefully the employer seeing him for all his assets that he clearly has and giving him that opportunity. But yeah, I think we need to not be too hard on employers, because it is difficult for them. I'm an employer and I have to manage how my colleagues are gonna feel about, so I've employed people with sex offences, for example, and it does need to be managed, but ultimately I have to practice what I preach as an employer and somebody that believes in social justice and rehabilitation for all. So yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't envy you the task, but I would use personal experiences and maybe get the clients themselves to put themselves out there and volunteer, or do a work placement first and foremost.
Brilliant, thank you.
Adam, we didn't get a resolution then, did we, with our poll?
No, so it looks like we've got our event sorted for the next 2 months, unless anything changes.
Cool.
So.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to suggest. Perhaps given that it's equal, maybe we do one next month and the other one the following month, and everyone gets their wish. Yeah.
Sounds like a plan. So our next event, if you haven't already registered, obviously registered for the event. If you're not a member, we do kind of have a database of people that are members, so people with convictions that want to hear from Adam on a weekly basis. But we also have ally organisations who just support the cause and are interested in the topics and stuff that we talk about. So if you are interested in being a member, please just email that email address and let Adam know, and we'll put you on the database, and you'll be notified of jobs that come available for people with convictions. So for you, Vicky and Julie, that might be really useful for you guys and your networks. And obviously, if you're working with people with convictions, they're more than welcome to join our network as well. We'd love to have them on board. Our next event's on the 7th of April, which is the first Thursday of next month, and it will be at 4 o'clock, so a slightly earlier time. I think we're probably going to go with the gendered approach topic maybe, and then have the networking following that, maybe. So yeah, please sign up for that. It'd be great to see you all there. And just thank you again for your participation. Has anybody got anything else to say before we close up?
Val has a hand up there.
I'd like to say something this time as well.
Yeah, we'll go to Val first and then Bill.
Okay, what I wanted to mention was that sometimes it's not the employer's choice, because some employers actually need to have safeguarding policies which are very strict. And in the safeguarding policy, it says like they have to do I don't know how many checks, and can't employ anyone or give anyone even like a contractor type of job unless they check all the criminal records and go through everything, and because we are as a charity, we're not full employers, but we're still a charity, but actually we were founded by an ex-prisoner, and we do work for prisoners, and I had to still rewrite our safeguarding policy for our thing. What we do is actually with mentoring for prisoners, like writing mentoring for prisoners and ex-offenders or people on convictions, and we actually employ people who have lived experience and had convictions. But I had to rewrite the whole safeguarding policy, because as a charity they say you need to have a whole safeguarding policy, else you can't even apply for any funding. Just had to rewrite and say, no, this is important. We need people who actually know about it all, and they are much better actually to communicate with people who have had have had convictions and need the support. You need a support. You're much better supporting someone if you know about it. So but this might be something like there are quite a number of jobs maybe which are not accessible just because the safeguarding restrictions are too strict for the employers. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Val. Bella, you wanted to have a quick point?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to put my virtual hand up all session, but it wasn't working. But anyway, I'll be very quick. Really great session. Everyone loved hearing everyone's shares. Give me a lot of encouragement. So I just wanted to quickly say about my experience having a heroin addiction for over 20 years, dealing as well, come out of prison last year. I knew it was going to be hard. I knew things like you said, Maria Claire, there's Greg's, there's Timpson's, there's other organizations that help. But so I went down the volunteering route. As some of you might know, I come running up in your very own New Leaf Awards. So what I did, I think Jerry said it, I hold up my lived experience card and I took ownership of that, which gave me empowerment to basically do a podcast. I've done a documentary. I've been on National Prison Radio. I've just last week, about 3 days ago, I was actually in HMP Leeds delivering workshops to the officers there, and I'm going to be going back in 10 weeks time. And I work in Manchester as well. So what I've done through volunteering is build relationships, so then they've got to know me. So then when a job comes up, I'm risk assessed, and that's the route that's worked for me. There's a lot more to it than that, but I do think people with convictions coming out do have more opportunities. The work needs to be started in prison before people come out. I just wanted to quickly share, because I know we're at the end, so a lot more to say, and over the coming months we'll get to know each other. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Villa. It was great to have you on board, and congratulations again for being the runner-up in the Volunteer of the Year. It was Volunteer of the Year, wasn't it?
Yeah, runner-up for Volunteer of the Year. Yeah.
Yeah, wicked.
Next year we're going for gold. Next year, this year.
Brilliant. And if you wanted to do a session at our conference, we'd welcome that, and for you to be a judge for the next year's. Obviously, if you're not entered yourself, but let's wrap it up there, guys, because I've got to go and cook dinner for my family, and I'm sure you've got commitments too. But a really stimulating discussion event as always. Bring yourselves to the next meeting. We'll miss you if you don't. And thanks again. See you soon. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Val.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Vicky. Thanks for participating. Bye, Julie. Thank you for being so open.